couple of questions that have dropped in. Rob, we'll kick this one over to you, leading us off, seeing as you were the first we heard from this afternoon. But it was just asking, what practical advice would you give to companies regarding the kinds of antitrust issues to be focused on over perhaps the next couple of years? So we'll start with yourself, Rob, but it's open to everybody.
Okay. But yeah, especially Aaron and the others to jump in. But I think, I think to be aware of and to take assessment of the changing economic environment, have the market shares changed? Has there been this increased concentrating effect that I've been talking about? And what other cutting edge antitrust issues might you want to be concerned about given the specifics of the COVID pandemic and how it's affecting your industry?
I guess I would weigh in on a couple of things we raised today. I think on the merger enforcement side, there is a clear emphasis on what I refer to as nascent competition. I don't think that's going away, and that relates in a lot of ways to these big tech litigations that were filed this past year. I would be keeping my eye out for what I consider to be traditional claims that we see. I mentioned if I was in the pharmaceutical space and I'm developing a COVID therapy and it's ultimately approved as safe and effective, that's going to be a very valuable piece of intellectual property for that firm. And when you have that, the incentives to bring litigation around that, particularly antitrust litigation, and how you enforce your patent, how you manage your IP, those claims may arise out of the pandemic. So I'd keep an eye on that. And I think there are going to be changes I think we will see beginning tomorrow at noon, changes in who the enforcers are at the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. That's not to say that the past regime was not effectively enforcing the antitrust laws, but every time you see administrations change, you see priorities change. But I actually think a lot of what we've seen in the last year is going to continue, because I do think these issues of tech, emerging competition, this focus on trying to catch anti-competitive conduct a little bit earlier than perhaps the enforcement agencies had previously done is going to stick with us for a while, because it has broad support across the political spectrum.
Thank you so much for that additional input there, Aaron. This next question, it dropped in during your segment, just asking, is there any particular lesson to be learned from the merger challenges from agencies lost in 2020?
The lesson with any merger challenge litigation that is lost or won by the agencies is these cases tend to be extremely fact specific. And the fact that the agencies had a rougher year than they normally do, and I think the FTC had a winning streak going near 5 years before they lost the Evonik case, is sometimes facts matter. That case involved a goofy market definition. Sabre and Faralogics involved two-sided markets, which is something that I think others spoke about today, including Rob. That's a really, and that too is an emerging issue, is how are two-sided markets going to be enforced and managed. So it's more of it really is indicative of interesting facts in interesting cases. Every merger challenge that gets litigated has unique facts. This year, there just happened to be a couple of cases with what I would call more unique facts than the ordinary year.
Thank you so much. And Vikram, Mahesh, this question dropped in during your segment, just asking, how would you compare some of the alternatives to SOFR, and what should a market participant consider when it comes to evaluating their options? Dropped in during your segment.
Sure. No, thank you for that. Hesh, I can start and feel free to jump in. So as I'd mentioned, it really depends on the economics that are right for you. So I would almost think of it as, when you're evaluating your options, hopefully you have options. If you don't, you have other means of trying to get some options, hopefully. But when you're trying to evaluate your options, I would almost think of it as a balanced scorecard. And in the balanced scorecard, you can have various attributes. You can have the economics of the deal, what indices allow me to meet my economic purpose. Is my cost of borrowing more correlated with a particular index versus another reference rate currently, or how do I evaluate the best fit for the economics that I am exposed to? I think that's one of the attributes market participants should consider. Another one could be, benchmark quality. How liquid is this particular index? SOFR is based on more than $1 trillion. It's going to have a lot of stability. It's going to have a lot of market participation. So is that how important is that particular attribute? How important is volatility? So the benchmark quality is going to be important. A governance structure. How easy or difficult would it be for a market participant to potentially manipulate this reference rate? So that's going to be relevant to you. That should be something that's relevant to you as well. You don't want to be in a similar situation with LIBOR again. So depending on what's relevant to you, and considering what I would refer to as a balanced scorecard approach, you can have various attributes that you line up, and then you can evaluate those attributes in a structured way so that you appropriately weigh the pros and cons of one alternative reference rate versus another.